Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show. As first responders, we risk our lives every day. Our financial security is under attack. Our pensions are in a state of emergency. A single on-duty incident can alter or erase our earning potential instantly and forever. We are the heroes of society. We are self-reliant and we need to take care of our own financial future. The Heroic Investing Show is our toolkit of business and investing tactics on our mission to financial freedom.
Welcome to the Heroic Investing Show, a podcast for first responders, members of the military, veterans, and anyone looking to improve their financial future and gain some freedom with their time. We teach America's heroes how to build passive income, build their startup business, and safely grow wealth through real estate and other alternative investments. We help current and prior first responders put protections, systems, and a team in place to help them build a life where they can focus on their passion, that service or product that they are uniquely gifted to share with others, making the world a better place for all of us. My name is Gary Pinkerton, and I co-host this show with Jason Hartman. This is episode 222, episode 222. Today's guest is Dr. Michael Lewis. Dr. Lewis is founder and president of the Brain Health Education and Research Institute. He's an expert on nutrition interventions for brain health, particularly the use of omega-3 fatty acids and CBD oils. And he's written a book that is called When Brains Collide, available on Amazon. He is a 31-year U.S. Army doctor who graduated from West Point in the mid-1980s and loves Navy. He loves Navy football. He said, in fact, go Navy, beat Army. I think that's what he said at the end of the podcast, but you'll have to go there to see it. He's a great guy, and he was very, very gracious with giving us the summary of all of his research and the amazing results they've had in bringing to light the positive benefits of omega-3s and CBD in the ability to improve brain function, to get rid of brain fog, but more importantly, to treat brains that have gone through a traumatic injury, whether it is physical or psychological. I found this fascinating. I think there's a place in everyone's life for improved brain function, and I think moving our nutrition back to where it was decades, maybe centuries ago, can actually do that for us. So I'm excited to give this a shot. I'm excited to read his book, and I hope that you enjoy this interview with Dr. Michael Lewis. Well, Heroic Investors, welcome back. Thanks so much for joining us. Today I have Dr. Michael Lewis, and a lot of great things to say about Dr. Lewis. He did go to West Point, but we'll look beyond that. Hey, Mike, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
It's great to be with you.
I didn't tell you in the outtake that I think I mentioned I was Navy, but I didn't mention that I was a Naval Academy graduate. But that's okay.
Yeah, we won't hold that against you either.
I didn't want to give you any ammunition before we started recording. So folks, I did a little bit of an introduction, but Mike, I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, to kind of give your background, how you ended up where you are today, and maybe some important steps that happened along the way.
Okay, well, I mean, out of high school, I went to West Point. I took a commission in military intelligence, and by way of airborne and ranger schools, ended up in infantry divisions up on the DMZ in Korea, and then Fort Ord, California, back when it existed, out in Monterey. And decided, you reach that 5-year point after the academies, and do you continue on or whatever. And I decided that at that point I was going to go to medical school, so to Tulane University down in New Orleans, because they had a 5-day weekend for Mardi Gras, so that was a good reason to go there. But it was a great experience, and then after that, off to DC, off and on for really, it's been almost I've lost count of how many decades it's been, actually, really. Walter Reed, I was assigned at the Pentagon, ran the primary care, the flight medicine, and the executive medicine clinics at the Pentagon for about 4 years, and then Johns Hopkins, and then Walter Reed Army Institute of Research for more training, and then lucky me, I got sent to Bangkok, Thailand for an overseas assignment for a 2-year assignment, and after 4 years, they said, you're having too much fun, come back and teach medical students in Bethesda. And ended up, that was kind of my last 8 years was mainly teaching, but along the way, I kind of put 2 and 2 together, because we got Iraq and Afghanistan going on, put 2 and 2 together and came up with an odd number, and went to the head of research at Walter Reed and said, is anybody looking at the use of omega-3s like you would get from fish oil to help soldiers recover from traumatic brain injury? And the answer was, no, why don't you? And it's like, because I don't know anything about it. And he said, well, you're the only one asking the question, and so here's some money once you start some research programs. And so that was a major career change, and I've been on that path now for about 12 years or so.
So what led you to have the hypothesis that omega-3 was a potential solution?
Well, the brain's made of fat, and about 30% of that is omega-3s. And the best source of omega-3s is generally seafood, but you can also do it with supplementation, and it's around. But it's actually part of the reason why I hit upon this was there was the Sago mine accident in January 2006, and there's one guy that survived the 40-some hours underground, and he was barely alive, and carbon monoxide poisoning, and they did all the things that you do for that, things like hyperbaric oxygen, and he needed dialysis because his kidneys had shut down and so on. And they were still left with a guy that didn't have a whole lot of brain function in a coma. And so they started flooding him down his feeding tube with high doses of fish oil. And short of the story is he walked out of the hospital a couple months later and has gone on to live a relatively normal life. That was one of those things I looked at and I was like, well, if it worked for carbon monoxide poisoning, might it work for traumatic brain injury? And that basically led me to ask that question, and nobody had the answer. So I, in good old military wisdom, 2 weeks later, I got called to a meeting and was told I was the DoD subject matter expert on it. And I figured I'd better start learning really quick. So I sought out the 4 or 5 people around the world that knew anything about it. And basically, was a trailblazer on that because nobody was talking about it. There was a little bit of talk about omega-3s and mental health, but nobody was talking about the use for traumatic brain injury. And it's been a wild ride ever since. There's been a lot of great science that's come out from different places. I made connections all around the world to help me try to answer some of these things, and part of it is overcoming, our current American diet. That's so inflammatory. Basically, it's high in omega-6s, and so we got to balance the inflammation with resolving the inflammation, and that's what omega-6 needs to be balanced by omega-3s. And while you could do it slowly, I had the idea, let's do it quickly. In fact, my original idea was how many omega-3s could we fit in a 20 milliliter syringe that a medic in Afghanistan could have in his backpack, right there at the scene of the injury, and started working backwards from there. And so ended up with a couple of patents along the way on that, and working with some major German corporations trying to develop this. And then the idea came up, well, what about before the injury in a preventive mode, and that took me down another route. Can we improve the resilience of the brain to withstand injury, whether that's physical or even psychological injury? And certainly PTSD and TBI are a major concern in the military today, but not just the military, but as we get out and as we get older, what are the long-term effects of TBI and PTSD on the brain as we or 50s and 60s?
Yeah. So I'm assuming we skipped over some of this, but when you started doing the research, you found very strong positive indications that it did help.
Absolutely. And a lot of it, because there was not a lot, and there still is not a lot in the scientific literature, it really came through experience. And some of it just because I had to make it up. I mean, I had to come up with something like, my younger brother got knocked out, and he's like, how much fish, or what should I do? I'm like, take some fish oil. And he's like, how much? And I kind of had to make it up. And it's funny that it all came together very scientifically, even though I I originally had made it up, but it turned out that what I made up was dead on scientifically. Both what the FDA says is generally recognized as safe, and a lot of the research out there that I could translate into the doses that I used. And then let's kind of triple that up. Let's do a loading dose, get a hold of this really quick. And what I found was people, if they were going to respond, people were starting to notice an improvement in their mental health, that clearing that brain fog and giving them energy. They would notice an improvement in a day or two at the doses that I was using.
Wow. So is this something that you have documented for the average person who hasn't gone through that kind of an injury? I mean, is it in a book? Is it, like just personally?
Well, no, it's a great question. And so the short answer is yes. I finally, after a couple of years, downloaded all this out of my head into a book called When Brains Collide. And you can, your listeners can get a copy of When Brains Collide at Amazon, or online at Amazon. Makes for a great Christmas present, I guess. But anyway, but it really goes into the whole prevention, treatment, even how I approached a couple of cases with severe traumatic brain injury where people were in comas. Lots of stories from the military, lots of stories from, just to generally make the point that omega-3s, fish oil, can be used in a variety of different ways, both prevention and to help the recovery, whether it's acute concussions or, I've dealt with NFL Hall of Fame players that are 60, 70 years old and they hadn't played football in 30 years, and how was able to turn their lives around even decades after their injuries.
My mother suffered from Parkinson's, and I for 26 years, and I really started paying attention to this way too late in the condition for her, I think. But I've found some fascinating podcasts on the impact of reducing or even reversing the effects of that condition.
Well, omega-3s are definitely a foundation, but what I found really interesting is just a few years ago that there was a couple of researchers, including a Nobel laureate at the NIH, who were awarded a patent for cannabinoids as antioxidants and neuroprotectants. And they go to say, CBD, which has now become this huge popular thing, that CBD, the non-psychoactive part of cannabis, can be, has great value in stroke, trauma, TBI, and neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So there's a lot of great science that's sort of hidden in the literature that was done by the NIH back in the 70s and 80s. So
even more of an impact than omega-3 is, you're saying, CBD oil.
Absolutely. And the combination of the two has been really almost magical in some ways. I have numerous patients come back and they'll typically say, hey, that fish oil was great, but when I started taking that little CBD pill, that was life-changing. And it just helps calm that voice down in the back of your head, relieve the anxiety, and when you do that, then all of a sudden you can focus and get things done. And it's really great to help sleep. So if you think about, some of the issues that we see veterans dealing with, PTSD as an example, it's a lot of times there's a lot of crossover between PTSD and anxiety, and sort of that voice in the back of your head that won't shut down, won't get to sleep, or wakes you up in the middle of the night, or just doesn't let you focus during the day. So imagine if you can quiet that voice down, and that's what CBD does. That's why it's so powerful. That's why everybody is, getting real excited about it. And the funny thing is, it's been around and been used for thousands of years, and we're acting like it's this new thing, but it's been used for thousands of years in every major culture in the history of mankind.
Wow. What is America just going through an enlightenment period?
Well, it's it's coming out of prohibition, basically. We had the alcohol prohibition in the 20s, and then in the late, mid to late 30s, Once that kind of resolved itself, the powers would be at the time turned their attention to this evil weed called marijuana, and so basically hemp and marijuana got thrown under the same bus. And hemp is an agricultural crop. It's what we used to make ropes out of,
Sure.
and sails, and linens, and everything else. And so it basically got demonized, where hemp doesn't have the THC that marijuana does. So they're both cannabis, but they're kind of like cousins, close cousins, if you will. And that hemp doesn't have the THC in it, and it grows as a crop. You grow it outside, you plant it in the spring, harvest it in the fall, and it only has trace amounts of THC. And now, fortunately, the federal government just 12 months ago, December of 2018, defined hemp as having 0.3% THC or less, and now makes it legal at the federal level. So that's really kind of thrown fuel on the fire, if you will, to the CBD industry.
Nice. And that's in your book as well, right? Your research on CBD and your recommendations?
Well, I was just really starting to learn about it at the time. So the way I start the book is actually a story about an 18-year-old kid in Northern Virginia out joyriding, and and his parents were out of town on a Friday or Saturday night, I think, and wraps the car. It goes around a turn on one of those dark, windy roads, and didn't make the turn. And basically, there was no reason why this kid should have ever lived. I mean, the parents were out of town. They got by the time they got there, they basically were telling him, just pull the plug. He's no chance of survival. And I got involved through some friends of friends and convinced the neurosurgeon, hey, why don't we start pouring high doses of fish oil down his feeding tube like they did with that Sago Mine guy, and got nothing to lose. And they're like, yep, we think you ought to pull the plug, but they got nothing to lose. Well, the kid went to his high school graduation 3 months later, and it's gone on. And about 5 years after that, right as I was writing the book, I got introduced to CBD and introduced him to CBD, and that just changed his world. He went from living with his parents, as a TBI survivor, to getting an apartment with a friend, moving out of his parents' house, finishing up college, getting a full-time job, and doing stand-up comedy in LA at night for the fun of it.
Wow.
So it really, and that's how I start the book with the story about his car accident, and I finish the book telling about, introducing the concept of CBD to him. So I guess my next book needs to be on CBD.
Fair enough. If I could take you back to, you did a couple transitions in your life. One was going from infantry to medical corps, right? But you were still in the military, and a much different military than being an infantry officer. And then you finished with 30 years and transitioned. You retired from there. Did you, and I'm sorry I didn't catch this before, but did you continue in private practice?
Well, my transitions are probably not necessarily the ones you want to try to follow. I'd say actually one of the hardest transitions was, it was really difficult leaving the Beltway. And
not
the comfort of the Beltway, and going literally with two little kids, like a newborn and a 2-year-old, and going literally to the opposite side of the world. I mean, I went from DC to Bangkok, and so transitioning there wasn't easy. But let me tell you, the transition coming back was much more difficult. I love Thailand as a place to live and to be stationed, and so the transition coming back here was really, really difficult, much more so than going there. But then, when it was time, say it's time to, you'll know when it's time to retire when it just sort of hits you in the face, right? You just know.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of things, the confluence of a couple of things And it's like, I knew. I always said I'll take the best offer. And for 30 years, the best offer was in the military until it wasn't. And then I knew it was time to get out. Had the opportunity to become the chief medical officer for a corporation in the D.C. area in the field of nutrition, in the field of omega-3s. And as the paper was finishing up, about 3 weeks before my retirement was official, the company got bought by a Dutch conglomerate, and my job disappeared before I even got to it.
Oh my gosh.
So all of a sudden I was jobless, retired, and had to figure things out. And I decided to go the entrepreneur route. And
Nice.
and that was 7 years ago. And it's not been easy. If anybody tells you being an entrepreneur is, easy, they are absolutely full of it. It's been, there's been months, there's been good months and ugly months, and
Oh yeah, absolutely.
it's all of a sudden you're missing the team that you played on, and you have to build a team, or just how to interact with people when you're in an office by yourself. It makes things difficult. So
And there's absolutely no parachute, right? So it's like the world's coolest roller coaster, but you don't know what's coming over the next bend. It is quite a gut check.
I look at it as, so I always have 7 or 8 eggs in my basket, and I'm trying to nurture them along to hatch. And, sometimes the eggs fall out of the basket and they're scrambled on the floor. And just when I think I'm losing all the eggs in the basket, it's almost like this invisible hand reaches over my shoulder and puts another egg in the basket.
Yep.
It's another opportunity. And so, continue to nurture them and try to hit singles, maybe doubles, but always hoping that one of these eggs are going to hatch and be a home run. And I think I've got a couple of them, that I'm nurturing along. But it's not easy, and sometimes you got to really focus on one and make it happen. My tendency is to try to focus on too many at the same time now.
Yeah. Multitasking, never a good plan, right? But some of these things take so long to get into practice, right? I mean, you get a patent, but that doesn't mean you're selling stuff at Walmart all of a sudden, right? I mean, it could be years.
Right, and some of the work, I was an advisor, or I guess I still am an advisor to a fish oil company, the leading retailer in fish oil, and some of the key people from there went to the CBD industry, and they dragged me along as a medical advisor, and that's been an amazing thing because it's just constant learning as this industry grows, and there's the potential I may move into some leadership positions in the company, but it's also a publicly traded company, and so the idea, the allure of having stock options and stuff like that's one of those home runs waiting for the pitcher to throw the ball.
Well said. So, well, I personally look forward to reading your book. What other suggestions do you have for the audience looking to improve their personal nutrition and their performance level, getting that brain fog cleared, if you will?
Well, it's interesting because I do a lot of work with special operations in a variety of ways, and that's one of the big concerns right now is the military's had a problem with suicides for years. Mm-hmm. The special operations, the wheels are starting to wobble or come off the bus. They've held their act together much longer than the regular military, but they're starting to run into problems and starting to realize that they need to do something about it. And it really gets back to two really basic things, which are diet and exercise, and everything else is just details. So, special ops, you think, well, they're always exercising. Okay, that's fine, and that's good. But when you retire, it doesn't mean you stop exercising. And there's good ways to exercise and healthy ways to exercise and unhealthy ways. But it's really 90%, 80, 90% really about nutrition and what we eat and how we eat. A lot of military, we rely on alcohol as a crutch. Probably not the best idea if you had a TBI or struggling with PTSD. But it's really the foundation of nutrition that I think is the biggest area that we don't pay attention to, that we need to pay attention to. And I've just seen people's lives completely turned around for the good when they really focused on good nutritional habits. Getting rid of the junk food and getting rid of the sugar and just really focusing on good quality nutrition, seafood based, but just good quality nutrition. And that can mean the difference between being on half a dozen medications or being on none. Yeah. I think we've completely underestimated, because of the power of pharmaceuticals, I think we've lost the vision of the power of nutrition. And that's the one big thing I would say is guys that are retiring really got to pay very good, close attention to a good nutrition plan. That's
awesome. Man, Dr. Michael Lewis, thanks so much. That was amazing. And I can't wait to, as I said, dig into your book and hear the successes that you're going to reach. I think you have some amazing things in the future. I really appreciate you sharing some thoughts and some wisdom with Heroic Investing.
My pleasure. And 30, most of my adult life was spent in the military, since age 17, right? So
yeah, same here.
Whatever we can do, you never stop serving. That's the biggest lesson I learned out of West Point is, I once was struggling and thinking about leaving West Point, and I had the old math professor basically pull me aside, and he said, if you want to be an infantry lieutenant, platoon leader, go to OCS. He goes, West Point exists to make leaders for the nation. And that was something I never, ever forgot.
That's awesome. That is awesome word. That is awesome. They also exist to make Navy feel better this coming December, and I really want to appreciate and tell you I appreciated that ahead of time. So
no problem.
It's about time.
We did good, letting Navy feel good about themselves for a lot of years. And,
that is true.
It goes for it, but you always got to remember, we always have one thing in common.
Yeah. Little competition, a little rivalry. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I loved this session. Hopefully the audience did as well. I can't wait to have you back on and get an update on all of this. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, sounds great. Remember, be Navy.
Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.